right, going to be one of those talky videos. All this guy does is talk, he doesn't fix cars. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a special episode just for a lot of the subscribers who have been asking for this for a very, very, very long time. And I've been promising you guys I will get around to doing this. And today we're going to do it. And that is, I'm going to discuss pretty much the business model that I use both for the car repair aspect and also for the YouTube, or more I should say social media aspect, because as you know I also have other social media outlets and things. And the idea is many of you guys, to put it bluntly, want to do what I'm doing, and that is as a do-it-yourselfer, how do you build a business with the auto diagnostics or the repair? I have also done flipping cars. That's actually how I started. We'll discuss that. Maybe getting into YouTube and social media outlets, things like that. And a lot of you guys have asked for some advice on how to get started in doing that and some of the things to watch out for and some of the things to definitely make sure you do. And that's what we're going to do in this video. So sorry, I know it's been a long time since I've posted. I had kind of a rough last 6 weeks or so. I had a couple weeks of business travel. While on business travel in California, I actually had an accident and broke a rib. And that took me out for a little bit. And then with the broken rib, I had to go back to California. Upon returning back, I caught COVID. And that was my first bout with COVID. It was pretty much as expected. It was probably the second or third worst flu-like respiratory infection I've ever had. It took me out for a good 11 days, pretty much. And then after that, I just had a lot of catching up to do. So my apologies on that, but hopefully this makes it up for you. And I will help you guys who are looking to generate income through what you watch me do on these videos. You'll be able to get on that road as well. So here is what we are going to do. A lot of you guys have asked many of the same things. How did I get started in this? What, if any, kind of training have I had? I have had no formal training ever, by the way, but I will talk about how I did develop and evolve some of the training. We'll do a few stories along the way, just because some of the stories you'll be able to identify with, many of you. And it'll help you to kind of get some motivation and sort of, just a little bit more of, yeah, you can definitely do this, because if I can do it, I can guarantee you pretty much anybody can, because I had no mechanical ability whatsoever going into this, exactly the opposite, to be honest with you. And so some of the stories will just kind of tell that journey so that I don't want you to get this impression when you watch me. It's like, well, this guy's got all this mechanical skill and everything. That was developed over time. I wasn't born with it, I can assure you. So we'll do some of that. I will also give you some of the best advice that I have been given, much of it from some of you guys out there, some of the viewers that I have also met in person who have given me advice. I will share that with you as well, and kind of go through the evolution of it, and I will specifically also discuss the actual business model and how you would actually best, in my opinion, kind of follow along. As you can see, we've built up a little bit of an empire, and one of the things is that all of the things you have seen as the channel has evolved, one of the things is that I do basically put everything that I make from the business back into the business. So you want to get to a point where you're not funding this out of your pocket from your real job, from your day job. You kind of want to get to the point where this becomes a self-feeding entity, kind of, and we'll talk about how to develop that strategy. But anytime you see me get a new tool, a new gizmo, whatever it is, basically that is paid for by what I do with this business, either through YouTube or fixing cars or diagnosing them, whatever. I will also give you advice on some things not to do, many of which I do, but that's because my situation might be a little different than yours. So let's get started. We're going to try to make this as entertaining as we can, because I know it's going to be a lot of talking, but we'll put a couple props up here. All right, there's one. There's another. All right. We'll get to those in a minute. I recommend you grab your favorite drink. I'm a Diet Mountain Dew fan myself. And let's go ahead and talk some business. All right. So one of the things that I'm very often asked is, how did I even get into this in the first place? And, I don't want to really do the thing like, well, I was the son of a sharecropper, but it actually did start a while ago. To be honest with you, not just with the car thing, but most of everything that I've been able to accomplish in my life, I actually, this is going to sound really dumb, but it's true, can actually be attributed to a movie that I saw when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And a lot of you guys are going to be able to identify with this, actually, although maybe not as many of you exactly in my situation. So things actually were not going according to plan so well when I was younger. My mom had some serious drug addiction problems and everything. Dad had left when I was like 2 or 3 or whatever. I've got a brother who's a year younger. And at the time, I want to say I was like 10 or 11 years old. My brother and I are in an orphanage while my mom is in rehab. Yes, they had orphanages. And we're sitting in our little prison cell. We had a television. And there was, on the television at the time, there was, some of you guys will remember, the Saturday Night Movie. And this is where they edited some big blockbuster movies for television, maybe 3 or 4 years after the theater release. And we were watching a movie called Smokey and the Bandit. And I will absolutely never forget for the rest of my life the moment when Burt Reynolds backed that Trans Am out of the tractor trailer. And I don't know what it was, but a lot of other people felt it too. And it was basically a love affair with that car. It was the coolest thing I have ever seen. And I remember just being mesmerized by that. And I kind of caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye, my brother looking at me with this look like, don't even think you're ever going to get one of those. And so I looked at him like, what? And he's like, you know what? And I'm like, one day I'm going to get one of those cars. And he points around at the room we're in this orphanage, and he's like, you think so? How is that possibly going to happen? Look at where we are, And I thought he had a pretty good point at the time, but I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to get there. And, well, you know the rest. This is actually my 3rd Trans Am that I have owned, and by far my favorite one. Now, the road to get there was not nearly as easy as I had hoped, but fast forward to when I'm 25 years old, I buy my first Trans Am. I call my brother up and I ask if I can take him out to lunch. He doesn't know that I bought this car yet. And so I go pick him up at his apartment in my car. He comes out, he sees me in the car, his jaw drops, and he's like, holy crap. And he goes, oh my God, do you remember when we were little kids at the orphanage? And I looked at him and I was like, dude, I never forgot. And basically I kind of geared my whole life towards whatever it took to get one of those Trans Ams. And unfortunately it ended up taking college and an awful lot of work and everything. But here's the point of the story. The point of the story is to make sure that you have a passion. Make sure that you have something that drives you. It's very helpful if your passion also can help to make money, if it is a lucrative passion. That is actually very helpful, but that's not so much necessary as long as your passion drives you to do the right things, to stay out of trouble, to keep on a path towards a career, not necessarily with that passion, but maybe to help fulfill that passion, if it makes sense. So that's the reason I wanted to share that story is, as you guys know, I have a huge passion for cars. I have a huge passion for science. What I do brings those two passions together. Having two passions is even better. The nicest part of it is both those passions also can be very financially beneficial. But it doesn't have to be. Again, the passion for that Trans Am that I saw in the movie that passion drove me to the point where I could then take it into something else. But that is my recommendation, to try to identify a passion that will motivate you through some tough times to keep you from giving up. Passion for getting into car repair was a little bit different, although everybody, if you're still listening, is going to identify with this, and that is when I was 17 years old, my mom had this old Chevy Chevette. Many of you guys don't even know what a Chevette is, probably. It's a total piece of crap. And this car was in dilapidated condition. The floorboard actually had a hole in it, and water would splash through when it's raining. So we put like a cooking pan, a baking pan on the floor and duct tape it on to try to keep water from spraying in. I used to drive the car to work and back when it was raining. Otherwise, I would walk. The car was really embarrassing to be seen in. And I remember one day I'm coming home. It's really late at night. I was working at a bowling alley, and on the weekends I would get off work at 2 a.m. And it's like 2:15 in the morning. I'm making a left turn into the street. Out of nowhere, the car starts making this bop, 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 bop. Hugely loud popping sound. I, of course, have no clue what's going on. I don't know anything about cars at all. And get it into the parking space, and for the next 3 weeks or so, every time we would take the car out, or every time I had to use the car, pop, 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 because my mom didn't have the money to get it fixed, and the car still ran. So it didn't seem to bother her as much. I thought it was embarrassing as hell. And one day I decided I wanted to try to see if I could fix it. So I jacked the car up and I propped it up on cinder blocks. I have no idea what I'm doing at all. No idea. And looking around while the car's running, looking for that popping sound, and I finally find this, what looks like a hole in the engine. I had no clue what was going on, but I could see that the hole had threads in it. And obviously something must have screwed into that hole. And then I look over around the engine a little bit, and I see this thing hanging from a wire that also had threads in it. Obviously, you guys are probably putting together, it was an oxygen sensor that had fallen out of the exhaust manifold. I had no idea what this was at the time. I screw the thing in. I didn't even have a wrench or anything. I think I used some pliers to tighten it as much as I could, start the car up, fixed it. That feeling of fixing it is something that to this day I still have just about every time I figure out a new problem and fix a car. And you guys have seen that on the film a lot as well. So that's what got me hooked onto doing the auto repair. Since then, I started doing minor things like oil changes. When I got my own car, I would do spark plugs, oil changes, brakes, the very basic stuff that I would read out of the Haynes manual. And then as I developed a little bit more, you know, a lot of the stuff in the Haynes manual, you see the engine rebuilding stuff, which I read page to page. Never turned a wrench on it though. And of course, yeah, at work and stuff, I would kind of talk cars with people, but I never put an engine at top dead center, compression number one. I would have no idea how to do that. And the wire diagrams might as well have been hieroglyphics. But what ended up happening was at some point with my own car, I had an overheating problem develop, and I took it in for service. It turned out to be a thermostat. And I want to say that it was like $220 for the bill. I didn't really think much of it until a couple weeks later when I went to the auto parts store to get my oil change stuff. And they had one of those sort of display trees, you know, with extra parts. And they had some discontinued manufacturer where they were selling thermostats for, gosh, something like $2.30 each, something like that at the time. And the guy asked me if I needed help finding a thermostat, and I'm like, no, I actually just had one replaced in my car for $220, and here they are on sale for $2. And like, what the hell? They charged me $220 for a thermostat. And the guy said something that has kind of stuck with me and changed things a little bit. He goes, well, they actually didn't charge you $220 for a thermostat. They probably charged you $10 for it, but they also charged another $210 because they knew how to put it in. And that kind of stuck with me because it's absolutely true. So at that point, things kind of changed where I really wanted to get interested more in trying to find out how did they know the thermostat was bad? That was such magic to me at the time. And even reading like the Haynes manuals and things like that, really, it gives you tips on how to do it, but they're very general and they're not very specific at all. And you honestly can read cover to cover and still not know how to do anything. And I started looking for ways that I could figure out how to do stuff. And one of them was a radio show that I know I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for some of you guys here, but honestly, the radio show was called Car Talk with Click and Clack. The Tom and Ray Magnolia's or something like that. I forgot their names. And at the time, this is long before there's internet, long before there's anything like that. This radio show was basically if Scotty Kilmer had a radio program. It was like now I look back on it and I recognize it as just the origin of parts changing mentality. People would call in, they would give their symptoms, and then Tom or Ray would tell them, oh yeah, you should change the MAF sensor, you should change the oxygen sensor. Oh, that sounds like a weak fuel pump to me. And so what I started doing was I started keeping notes. And I would take all of these notes that I would type up in my notebook here, and basically what I would do is I would listen religiously to that show, and every symptom that they had, I would write down that symptom, and it would be something like, yeah, my car is hard to start in the morning. So I'd write, car is hard to start in the morning. And then they would say, yeah, that's going to be a weak fuel pump. You've got a bad fuel pump. So I'd put fuel pump. Well, then a couple weeks later, somebody would call, yeah, my car has a lot of trouble starting in the morning, but after I start it up, it runs fine. Oh, you've got a bad check valve in the fuel tank. I was looking back, I was like, I thought it was a bad fuel pump. So I'd put check valve, so it's either a bad fuel pump or a check valve. A couple of weeks later, somebody else calls in. Yeah, my car's really hard to start in the morning. Oh, yeah, well, you know, what you probably have is a vacuum leak. And then once the car warms up, that vacuum leak seals in, and you're good to go. So, yeah, I would say you probably have an intake manifold leak. You should replace the intake manifold gasket. Write that one in there. Well, before long, you see the problem. You've got one symptom and 5, 6, 7 fixes for that symptom, and there's no way to tell which of those fixes is it. And I quickly put together that this was completely fruitless, and the whole diagnostic thing, I kind of gave up on it because I just thought this is just something you have to go to automotive school to learn, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to be a scientist. So I kind of abandoned it until a little bit later. And that gets into kind of the start of a business model, which is how I started making money off of fixing cars. And that would be when I started flipping cars. So here's how that goes. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the business modeling. Sorry if that rambled on a little bit, but I kind of like those stories, and I don't care if you don't. But for years and years and years and years, I just kind of stuck with the thing where I would do my basic maintenance on my cars. By this time, I've got my Trans Am. Anything that went wrong with the cars that I couldn't fix, I would take it in to get repaired at the dealer. That's just the way it was. Sometimes I would do things where I would take it into the dealer and I would have them diagnose it, and I would pay the diagnostic fee. And then I would come back home, and then they said that it needs an ignition coil, whatever the hell that is. So I go to the auto parts store, I buy an ignition coil, and I hold the ignition coil while I look in the engine for the thing that looks like this and replace it. And probably about 60 or 70% of the time that would fix it. And other times it wouldn't fix it. And then I got to bring it back. And that was the way life was. Well, one day I got this wild hair up my ass. I don't know what I was thinking. And I just decided maybe I would be better at doing this if I were to rebuild an engine. If I were to buy a car and it had a blown engine and I could rebuild the engine, I could probably learn more than I ever have cumulatively to this point so far. So what I ended up doing was kind of looking in the Auto Trader or whatever. The internet had kind of started, you know, to have a lot of car stuff available. I could filter out for cars that were not running or had major problems. And I bought a Chevy Corsica. I want to say it was a 1995 Chevy Corsica that would not even start for $200. And it looked like a $200 car. So I had the car towed over to my house. I have absolutely no idea what I am doing, but I had my Haynes manuals. I had researched a lot of stuff in my notebook here, and I found a couple of people that actually really did help me, at least with mechanical diagnostics. One of them is a guy named Phil Parsons. He was kind of a professional automotive technical writer. And he had a website, and he made a lot of technical things. I'll show them to you. The other one was a guy, a lot of you guys will probably recognize, Larry Carley. And Larry Carley, also a technical writer, wrote a lot of technical articles on what every component in the engine does, how it works, how to test it, all that kind of stuff. And also he wrote some software programs as well that were pretty useful. But it was stuff like this. You've got articles like how to test sensors, and it's very basic. And it's how I started to use a digital volt ohm meter, very basic things like that. And very simple articles here, technical article on removing an intake manifold, stuff like that. Obviously there was articles in here that I recovered on how to do compression tests and things like that. And so I followed that, and I determined that the car needed a head gasket. So, using my toolkit, which at the time was this was my toolkit, my original first toolkit. Every tool that I owned in my life fit in this box. And you can imagine the frustration that I experienced of replacing a head gasket on a car with pretty much a crescent wrench, a socket set that I got from Walgreens, a few wrenches that I had bought. It goes without saying I had to buy some tools that I didn't have as well. And after about, I want to say it was 5 weeks, I finally replaced the head gasket in this 4-cylinder Corsica. I went to start the car up, and lo and behold, the car started and ran perfectly. And I was amazed for 3 seconds, after which time I heard the loudest psh, and coolant literally shot from outside the engine through a gap in the cylinder head, and it shot across the entire garage at my house, and just immediately the engine started chugging and died. And I could easily tell that I had immediately blown another head gasket, and I had no idea what I did wrong. So I took it apart and spent a little more attention, and it was at that point that I realized I needed to take the car to a machine shop, because I had finally paid attention to all of the machine work where you measure for cylinder flatness and gaps that I didn't do before, because whatever. And yeah, it all made sense then. And ultimately, I did finally fix the car. I pledged that was the dumbest idea I ever had in my life. The car cost $200. I spent $700 on tools and the machine shop and the new cylinder head and all of this stuff. And I ended up selling the car just to break even for $950. So I made $50 on this thing. And I was like, well, I'm glad I got that out of my blood. I will never do that again. But then a thought occurred to me. That thought was a very intimidating one. But it was, if I were to do that again, I would probably make $500. And the reason being because I already have the tools. I already learned my lesson. I have the know-how. And I would also be faster and more efficient at it. So I did. I ended up buying another car just to play it safe. I bought a Chevy Corsica. And again, the owner said it had a blown head gasket. Perfect. I know exactly what to do. So I went ahead, bought the car. I wasn't too worried at the time that the car had this knock, 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 really loud clunking sound at the time. But upon replacing the head gasket, I quickly realized that I was in a bucket load of trouble, because when I removed the head from the car, the cylinder head, I could see that there was severe piston damage, and that's what that clunking sound was, and the piston was kind of flopping around in there. The cylinder was completely trashed, and it was obviously something even a machine shop couldn't do. And now I'm back in the same boat I was before, where I don't have the tools to fix this, I don't have the know-how to fix it, I'm probably going to make mistakes again. So it was pretty disconcerting. What I ended up doing, I wasn't sure how to best handle this, but that's where I discovered the junkyard, the salvage yard, which is one of the things I'm going to tell you is going to be one of your best friends if you start off doing this. The salvage yard is your hero, and it will actually dramatically increase your profits. What I ended up doing was finding an engine from the salvage yard for $200. I pulled it myself at the salvage yard, which was no easy task, especially with my little toolbox, which had expanded a little bit at the time. But I got the engine over to my house and figured it all out. It took me probably about 2 months, maybe about 2 months. Got the engine replaced and everything. Lo and behold, the car ran perfectly fine. I probably had another couple $100 in the car with tools and some other things, fluids, whatever, and ended up selling that car for $1,200 for actually more than a $500 profit, more like a $600, $650 profit. And that's where it kind of started to roll a little bit. Now I can not only replace cylinder heads, I can replace engines. And if you can replace an engine, you can replace a transmission. The next car I bought was a 1995 Dodge Intrepid with 3.5 liter engine, bad transmission, replaced the transmission. I made $1,000. After doing this for a while, you start to develop your skill set. And what I ended up doing was I did something that I really think is a great business model plan, but at the time I didn't realize it so much. It was kind of more to reward myself. This is basically what I did on the weekends, and I would get to the point where I could turn over a car and flip the car in a weekend and generally make about $1,000. One of the tricks is I found it was most effective for me to be within the selling the car at the $3,500 to $4,000 range at the time. By today's standards, we're talking about $5,000 to $7,000. But at the time, that was where the market was. Yes, there are people that will buy $15,000, $20,000 used cars, but the problem is you have to put that capital up, and your investment for parts and everything is going to be a lot higher. You're not going to be able to find a late model engine or transmission at the salvage yard that you can just pull yourself. That is not going to happen. And also your market is very, very, very minimal for that. Whereas the number of people that right now would buy a car for around $5,000, you've got like 80% of the market. So you're going to sell the car in an hour. And that was basically the model that I made. And what I did was every time I sold the car, I would reward myself by spending some of that money from what I made on a new tool that would make my life easier. One of the first things I bought is my air compressor. You guys have seen this in pretty much every video. I still have the same exact air compressor that I bought quite some time ago. And then I would start buying air tools and power tools and grinders. I bought a parts cleaner. Every time I flipped a car, I would allow myself a budget to increase my capabilities. And that was kind of how I started building up to pretty much everything in the garage. After a while, you kind of can start to get some aesthetics. I started buying the cabinets and the rolling tool chests and things like that. As I expanded things, I was able to do more. I started getting into engine rebuilding, so I would rebuild the engines. Turns out that that's not very cost effective, to be honest with you. I don't recommend that. Rebuilding engines is the amount of labor and the amount of time that it takes Quite honestly, you can do a lot better replacing with a used engine, a lot quicker, and I just think it's a much better financial decision in my opinion. But for a few years, I would do this thing where I was flipping the cars every weekend and doing actually pretty well with that in combination with my regular job. Now, there was a couple of issues with it, though. One of them is that I have a conscience, and what I knew was that most of the people that were buying the cars from me tended to be people in pretty bad financial straits. A lot of times it was people buying their first car, like a high school kid or something buying their first car, maybe a kid going off to college and they need to buy a car that they worked for with their own money. And I just felt like I had a responsibility that I didn't want to cause these people more problems than what they already are having. They're kind of right at the end of their financial rope. And the last thing I want to do is sell them a car that's going to blow up in a month or so. So what I did was I started probably about 7 or 8 months after I started kind of doing the flipping thing, I started including warranties with the car. And what I would do is I would offer a bumper-to-bumper, labor-only warranty. So they would buy the parts. Let's say they buy a car from me and the engine blows, and I would give them like a 3-month or a 6-month warranty and they could pay extra for it. So the way it would work is if, let's say they had a 6-month warranty and within a few months the engine blows, well, they have to buy the engine, but I would install it for free. And I, of course, only once ever had to replace. It was a transmission one time that did fail, and I was good to the warranty. The person paid for the transmission. I replaced it. But the trick with that is to try to prevent people from taking advantage of your warranty by maybe they'll run the oil out of the engine or something like that to intentionally damage it, and then they're like, well, you owe me a free engine now and a brand new one. So it wasn't like that at all. I would replace it with a used engine or whatever. But that's just an idea for you to kind of protect yourself, but also increase your sales. It was a lot easier for me to sell with the warranty that I would include. And also, I felt better about it because I didn't want to sell the car to somebody who had a problem with it later on. I wanted the car to be good. I wanted them to have a good experience with it because that's what I would want for myself, and I know their situation. There was a second problem that would happen with that, and that is, remember, at this time, I'm still pretty bad at the diagnostics. And very often, one thing I would have to do, if they brought the car back and it had a check engine light, I would connect up a code reader to it, and it would say something, blah, 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 oxygen sensor. Of course, you replace the oxygen sensor, it doesn't fix it. Very often, I would have to take the car, drive it up to a shop or something, have them diagnose it, and then I fix it. I have to pay for the diagnostic fee. I lose the time because I have to take the car up to the shop and get away back to my house and back and everything. Also, a lot of times, what they said was wrong with the car didn't fix it. So I lost money that way. And my inability to diagnose was costing money. It was affecting my profitability very much. So that's where I started to decide I need to learn how to diagnose these cars better so that I can increase my profitability and not rely on taking it to a shop. And there was one third thing, and this is something that you'll have to kind of work out yourself. One of the things is that most states will have a limit on the number of cars that you can sell in a year. At the time when I was doing this, I think it was 12 cars a year. So for me, that's fine. I could sell 1 car a month. And if I wanted to do more than that, there's some creative things I'm sure you can think of. But I just wanted to bring that up that if you plan on really doing this, it may help for you to invest to get a dealer's license or something. You also want to be cognizant of your neighbors as well. If you're doing this in a place with an HOA or something like that, you're going to need to keep this in your garage. You need to keep things clean. One trick I strongly recommend, fix your neighbor's car. That's what works for me. If you fix your neighbor's car, your neighbors will be amazingly tolerant of tow trucks coming up at 10 o'clock at night in front of your house. So those are some tricks that you can do, but some things to be aware of. With selling the cars, The nice thing about it is if you sell the car, you don't have to do the warranty thing like I did. You can sell the car. Your hands are clean. You are done. If they have a problem with the car, that is on the buyer. You are not legally obligated on anything. There's kind of a nice thing about that as opposed to repairing a car. And then another thing about selling the car too is not such a good thing. You're going to be selling these cars and you're going to be getting a lot of what I call Craigslist people. You know what I'm talking about? It's really kind of a pain dealing with these Craigslist people that are kind of shady. You don't really want them to know where you live. You got to deal with the fact that you're going to put in there this sale is cash only, no lowballing, no whatever. And the first thing they're going to do is try to talk you down from the price. And then when they do, they're going to ask if they can make payments on the car. So there are some absolute aggravations with selling the cars. And that kind of leads to how I got into the diagnostics, actually. So as you can see at this time, I've got a pretty good business model developed for the car flipping thing. And it is improving as your skill set improves. The other thing is that you can buy better cars because now your budget is increased because you're making more money on each sale at the time and everything. So that business model, I honestly got to tell you, while I didn't like the drawbacks that I discussed with you guys, it was phenomenally profitable. And you could probably easily make a pretty good living off of it, especially if you've got your own garage and you got the right tools and everything and your neighbors are tolerant and things. It is remarkably profitable. But the thing is that also it's very laborious. The other thing is that to maximize your profit margin, you're going to the salvage yard. In the winter time, that's kind of a pain in the dick. When it's raining, when it's super hot. So I started doing things where I would use full service salvage yards where they would pull the parts for me, but that triples your costs. And quite honestly, the car flipping thing, that wasn't really what was exciting to me. What was really kind of exciting to me was not flipping the cars, but fixing them. I really enjoyed troubleshooting and trying to figure out, what's wrong with the car. And then once I figure out what's wrong with the car, well, now if I got to replace the engine, I actually really didn't like it that much. So what I started doing was reading, I used to get these service manuals, factory service manuals for cars, and I started now paying more attention to all of that stuff that for years I ignored. Things like measuring the voltage on a hot wire on a math sensor, fuel trims, looking at input and output ratios, all of that scan tool data. It turns out in the service manuals, the factory service manuals, they will tell you what that scan tool parameter is that makes absolutely no sense to you whatsoever, and how you can make interpretations of it. So I started doing that. I started buying books from automotive technical schools, so the classroom textbooks that would be used in automotive tech schools. These also give you great information on how to do diagnostics with the scan tool, how to do diagnostics with the scope, which is, I didn't even implement until just a few years ago myself, how to use your DVOM, stuff like that. I still do it to this day. This is the one I'm reading right now. This is where I'm getting my variable valve train diagnostic capabilities, is from textbooks like this, which are meant for automotive schools. So what I did was I started doing that mostly so that I could supplement my ability to continue my flipping gig, or whatever you want to call it. Well, what ended up happening as a result of that was I discovered that very often I would have people from around the neighborhood that would want me to take a look at their car, and I could very quickly diagnose the car and usually fix it within a couple of hours. And that got me thinking. So what I started thinking is, well, maybe this is an opportunity where I can completely overhaul my business model and go from, instead of all the labor that is involved with the car flipping thing was very, very, very extensive. And by this time, I'm getting into my mid-40s, and you just, at that age, you're kind of, you don't really want to do that stuff as much. And with the fixing the cars and diagnosing them, most of the time I didn't even have to get my hands dirty, and I would just sit in the car with the air conditioning and use the computer, and I would diagnose it. The other thing I really liked about it was just that when somebody watches you do a brake job, or if they watch it on YouTube, the first thought is, well, I can do that. I can do that. There's no amazement with anything mechanical like that. Even replacing an engine, you look and you're like, it's really just it's like taking out a whole bunch of bolts and removing parts. And then you put a whole bunch of bolts back in, and you just got to remember the order you did it. That's really actually honestly the truth. There is nothing mesmerizing or amazing. But when you use the computer and you look at a graph, and that owner of the car is watching you do this, and they have absolutely no clue what you are doing, and then you tell them, oh, I see the problem, you got this intake manifold hose that's broken, and you fix this broken hose. Yeah, they look at fixing the broken hose and they can do that. But how you knew that that's what was wrong, that look that they get, like how in the world, that never gets old. I love that. And I got to do that all the time, and fix the car right in front of them. And sometimes they would have quotes for $2,000, $3,000, and I can fix it for $20 right there in front of them many, many times. And that was hugely rewarding. And what I ended up doing was deciding to change my business model over to the diagnostics and repair type thing. Now with that comes a whole slew of other changes that you need to be aware of. So with the repair and diagnostics, there's several things that become a challenge versus the car flipping. One of them is that your time is not quite as much your own. The beautiful thing about the car flipping thing is at any given time, I always have a car in my garage in any kind of state of disrepair or disassembly, and I can take my time as much as I want, or I can hurry as much as I want to get that finished and everything, because nobody's waiting on it. Once I get it finished, I put it up for sale, and however long that takes, whatever. With the repair thing, it's not like that at all, and it's one of the first things you got to be aware of. When somebody drops their car off with me, they're really hoping to get it back that day. So your time becomes a little bit more pressed to finish things. The other thing is that now I've got 3 or 4 people on a Saturday that want me to diagnose and fix their cars. Well, it becomes very difficult to schedule that, because sometimes the diagnostic takes 20 minutes, sometimes it takes 3 hours, and then you've got that other car that's backlogged there. So you have to kind of develop a method for scheduling, because now people are waiting on you, and that changes the dynamic quite a bit. The other thing is that, to be honest with you, it's less profitable. It really is. I have turned $3,000 in a weekend with the car flipping. $3,000 in one weekend. But you're working all weekend. It's not like an 8-hour weekend or anything. You're working like 20 hours over the weekend. There's no way that I could do that with the repair. No way. And especially with my policy, because very often I'll do the diagnostics for free, which I'm not advising. You should charge for the diagnostics, and I do charge for diagnostics when I go out in the field and do them. I'll typically charge $50 an hour. But when they bring it here to my garage, I typically don't charge them, because it opens the opportunity to make a video. At the time, I used to charge $35 an hour because, hey, I'm not a professional, I'm not formally trained. After 8 years now of doing this, I feel as confident giving a diagnosis as much as any dealer mechanic would. So, I increased my prices, but I still generally, to be honest with you, this is where the business model isn't so good, and you should make a better one. I do it kind of based on what I think people can afford. If I can really clearly see that somebody's really struggling and they're using this car for work, I'm going to help them out as much as I can. And very often I'll try to do a video on the car because I get the revenue from the video, and we'll talk about that later. But if you don't have the video revenue and everything, well, then you're just doing charity totally. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, if you're looking to make money, if this is a business, you have to limit that. But I generally look at people and, I try to aim for my getting $75 an hour. But if I can see clearly they're not going to be able to afford that, I work around it with them. I got my other job. I don't really need the money. But you'll have to come up with something on that, how you're going to do your pricing. And there's a million ways you can do that, and mine is probably the worst. The other thing is that, if the guy brings me the car and I can smell weed in that car, he's paying full price. If he has money for weed, he's got money to pay me to fix his car. Not a solid business model, but just something to keep in mind. One of the other things besides the pricing with your business model, because you need to be compensated for your time, is the tools get way more expensive. Just the tools that I have for the types of diagnostics that I do, those tools cost more than all the other tools I have for engine rebuilding, for pulling a transmission, for all the other tools combined, bearing pullers, oh my gosh, piston ring compressors, whatever. All the other tools combined don't add up probably to half of the cost for the tools I do for diagnostics. This is a major consideration in your business model, because if you are not doing a lot of diagnostics, or you are not charging for diagnostics, you will find yourself in the hole pretty quickly when you've got thousands and thousands of dollars of diagnostics tools and you're only charging $100 per diagnosis. You've got to do a lot of diagnoses just to break even. So it's a very important thing for you to consider. And that's where also doing the repair comes in. There's a lot of people who will just want the diagnosis and then they do the repair themselves. Hey, kind of like I said I did. It turns out that actually hits you pretty hard when you're doing this as a business. So you got to kind of develop around that. And one of the ways of doing that is to charge for the diagnosis each time. And that is my recommendation. I don't do it, but you need to do something to recoup your money. I don't really do it, again, because I've got the YouTube and the paid channel, which compensates me, in my opinion. But if you don't have that, and even if you do, I strongly recommend thinking of that business model. Now, other than the pricing and that kind of thing, you also have an additional liability now. When you sell a car, hey, that's on the buyer. And when I would sell the car, I would already get the car emissions inspected and safety inspected as well. So I would get both of those done so that the buyer already has their emissions, already has safety. It also makes it easier to sell. They know they don't get surprises. They can just take that right to the DMV. Well, you don't have to do that when you're selling a car. They could take it. It could blow up on the way to the automotive emissions place, and that's their problem. When you're fixing a car, well, that's your problem. Because they're going to bring the car back to you. And one of the most expensive things you can have is a comeback. If you decide to go the auto diagnostics and repair route, you do not want a comeback. Those will erode your margins remarkably, because it's very hard to charge for the comeback, particularly if you made the wrong call. Obviously, we've discussed this many times before. There are some times when, for example, let's say that I diagnosed there was a bad oxygen sensor on a car, and it's something like a P0138, whatever, and I know it's a bad oxygen sensor. I correctly diagnose that. I replace the oxygen sensor, send the guy home with his bill. We're all square. It's good. But then he comes back later, this time with a P0420 code. Well, yeah, because now that the oxygen sensor works, it is able to detect a catalyst inefficiency. It was not able to do that before I fixed it. Well, those are a problem, and you got to work that out with your customers. And, like, yeah, I'm not going to put a free catalytic converter in the car. I made the right diagnosis. I made the right call. But it's just really hard to sell that to a customer. So one of the things that you want to do, I always make written records of my diagnosis, what I found, what my rationale is. I discuss it with the customer. Of course, they only have so much understanding. But then it's easier for me to explain, well, here's the thing. This was the code you had last time, P0138. This is the code you have this time. Sometimes I'll even take camera photos of it and put it in with their paperwork and everything. And I can explain to them the reason that this happened is because now you always had this other code, but the bad sensor couldn't detect it. It's really kind of a challenge. And the other thing that makes it a real challenge that you don't think about is you are not a professional mechanic. You're a do-it-yourselfer. You're doing this out of your home garage. And this guy lives 7 houses up from you. And he's putting together, well, that kind of makes sense, but also this guy is giving me fast talk. He doesn't know what he's really doing as much. And that is a problem that honestly, it takes a long time to get over before you develop a reputation and everything. We will talk about one of the strategies that I used to try to address that a little bit later. It's actually how the YouTube channel got started. But that is something that you need to keep in mind. If you have a comeback, it's going to be very, very difficult for you as a do-it-yourselfer, I believe, more than a professional, because your credibility in explaining that is not as good. The other thing that's important to do is if it is your fault, if I replace the oxygen sensor and he comes back with a P0138 code, I'm going to be like, wow, yeah, I made a mistake. It wasn't the heater element in the oxygen sensor. There is something outside of the oxygen sensor that I missed. You got to take responsibility for that, and you will have to swallow that. You probably have to pay them back for the oxygen sensor because they didn't need it. Your profit margin is harder to maintain, I can tell you for sure, with the repair over the flipping. But I don't deal with asshats from Craigslist. I don't deal with people asking to make payments and things like that. It's a lot easier in that regard, so there's a little bit of a trade-off. But had I started everything with the business model that I have now, it would have taken me a lot longer to build up everything that I have. So, maybe you should weigh that in. Do a mixture of both, perhaps. There's a lot less pressure when you are doing an engine swap on a car that you're going to sell, because if you make a mistake, if you screw it up, well, you just lost a lot of time. Whereas you do that on a customer's car, well, now you've destroyed their second most valuable possession. So maybe a mixture of things. I don't know. That would be up to you. I'm just telling you some things to watch out for. The other thing is you've got an additional responsibility. If, let's say, you're doing a brake job and you put the car back together and they drive off and you forgot to tighten the lug nuts. Well, that could be a major problem for you because you have a responsibility, a liability in that. And depending on different states, there can be different laws. No state that I know has a law that as a do-it-yourselfer, you can't work on someone else's car for money. You don't need an ASE degree and things like that or certification to do that, except in the case of air conditioning. Air conditioning, if you fix air conditioning for money, that you have to have ASE for, but for anything else you don't. But it doesn't mean that you're absolved of liability if somebody gets killed or they kill someone else or they destroy the car because the wheel fell off. You cannot afford to make a mistake. You cannot afford to make a mistake. And one of the things I recommend you doing is making a LLC, a limited liability corporation, out of your business, even though you're sole proprietor. You can make an LLC, which basically means that worst case scenario, people can sue your business, but they can't take your house away or your personal car, things like that. So keep the business separated, and that is one of the most important things I recommend that you would do if you're going to do the diagnostics, and especially the repair. The diagnostics, if you make the wrong diagnosis, well, you just look like an idiot and maybe your credibility will go. You repair it wrong and the car catches fire because you didn't tighten a fuel line. you're going to wish you had an LLC. So definitely a recommendation with that. Some other considerations with the diagnostics and repair, besides your liabilities, your increased costs, your responsibilities in comebacks, or if you make a mistake. Some other ones, oh yeah, scheduling, that was another challenge too. So another challenge that you're going to have with this is keeping up with the technology. One of the things you could do, if you wanted to, is you could just limit, well, I'm only going to work on cars of this era, or I'm going to do, man, you're going to find you're going to be very limited with that. You can do that with the flipping the cars. You can always buy a 15-year-old car, a 20-year-old car even, really cheap all the time, junkyards full of parts, so you never have to learn anything new. If you're going to get into the diagnostics and repair and you're going to do anything making money off of this, you are going to have a wide variety of skill sets that constantly change, and you have to improve them. You're always learning all the time, because pretty much every time, still for me, somebody brings a car in, I still may have never worked on that model before. It may have some technology I have never seen before, particularly when you start seeing cars coming off of warranty. You start seeing cars from 2015, 2016, and now they're on CAN network, and they have all different things on them that you are not familiar with. They've got direct injection, they've got variable valve timing. You have to keep up with this, so that's another challenge, and it means you also have to buy new tools, and your expenses increase, so definitely some things to keep in mind. This is not going to be for everybody. Even if it is for you, you've got to have your business model designed where you have the income to be able to support buying a $1,000 pressure transducer for your $3,000 oscilloscope. That is entirely possible that you may need to make those kind of investments. And as a do-it-yourselfer, just working out of your garage, 3 or 4 cars a weekend or something, yeah, it may take you a year to break even for that. And you're not going to live, you know. So, man, you really got to think about these things. For me, that's actually where the final part of this video will come in. I'm trying to think if there's other things with the diagnostics and repair. But those are things that are both pluses and minuses, and I think I covered pretty much most of them if I think of others later. But this is where the YouTube thing comes in, and I'll give you some help on this. One of the things I get asked all the time is, hey Matt, I've got a YouTube channel, but I can never get past the magic 10,000 viewer mark, much less the 1,000 viewer mark to even get monetized. I can't understand why I can't do that. And I'll be honest, sometimes once in a while, I'll look at those channels and I'll be like, oh my God, that channel's amazing. It's like way better than mine, way better. But there are some things that you have to do in order to try to get your channel noticed and build up that. And we'll get to that. But the way I started my YouTube channel was in response to one of the problems that I described earlier, and that was how I get over this thing that when people find me, and that's another thing that we haven't talked about, by the way, is how to find people. I used to look on Craigslist and look for people that are looking for a mechanic, and I would contact them and say, hey, I'll diagnose your car for free. And I would sort of develop a clientele that way. They then tell other people, this guy was amazing, he diagnosed the car for free, he fixed the car for free. And then you get other people, and of course you charge them. That's one way of doing it. Most of it, by far, overwhelming, far and away, is word of mouth. I only had to do that a few times, and then those people that I fixed their car or diagnosed it for free told others, and it took care of itself from there. So that's the way you build up your clientele. Right now, I turn away more people than I accept because I just get so many references. But I forgot to mention about that. That's the best way to get started, is just reach out to people on Craigslist or social media or something. Once you impress them, it's amazing how much they'll tell other people. Recently, I fixed a car for somebody on Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app for our neighborhood. They told everybody on Nextdoor. My phone rang off the hook so much I couldn't even handle it. So it's actually pretty easy to get the people in. What's hard is when those people come to you and they're like, okay, well, wait a minute. This guy's working out of his garage and I don't know about this. That's the part that's hard to get over. Right now for me, with the way my garage looks, people look at this and they're like, holy cow, this is better looking than any professional garage I've ever been. So I don't have that problem anymore. Also, a lot of people recognize me from YouTube now. For you, that's probably not going to be the case, and you're going to have to go through what I went through, where I literally have had people come up to me and then change their mind and go, you know what, I appreciate it, and I'm sure you're a great guy, and I'm sure Phil, had a great experience with you, but I'm just going to take my car over to a shop, and no offense or anything. That would happen to me all the time. What I decided to do to try to build up my credibility more was show my methods that I use on YouTube and make a YouTube channel. And that way, when I get new clients or something, I can say, well, hey, you can check out my YouTube channel and you can look and see how I do things. It would just look like I would have credibility. And it turned out that worked out pretty well. The other thing is, to be honest with you, I kind of had an inkling that the channel would do very well at the time. At the time when I started the YouTube channel, there was really only a couple of other channels that did diagnostics, especially the way that I do them. You had Scanner Danner, of course. This was long before South Main Auto and some of the other ones. I'm trying to think, there was another one too where they did a lot of the diagnostic type stuff. But there were only like maybe 3 or 4 really well-known diagnostics channels, and I kind of had an inkling that mine would probably take off pretty well. So that didn't hurt either. And I got a lot of good advice on that. You got to have good audio, good video. When I first started, again, it was not with the intent so much of making a successful channel. So I didn't really pay attention to those things. Used a really bad camera, bad audio, and all that. You guys, most of you probably have been through that. It was Spelunkard and Stuzzman, 2 of my first subscribers, that gave me advice. Stuzzman even offered to give me a free camera because he thought it was so necessary. But you want to make sure you invest in your audio and video quality if you're going to try to make a successful YouTube channel. Another thing that I really strongly suggest you do if you're just starting a YouTube channel, probably don't want to do what I want to do. I've done exactly what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make a channel that is basically a safe haven from idiots. And I think we've done an amazing job of that. Look at the comments on any video. Never once are you going to see, well, I think you should put seafoam in it. It doesn't happen on this channel. And that's exactly by design. The problem is doing that will limit your audience. If you want to have a really, really successful YouTube channel, in my opinion, I would consider it selling out for me, but maybe not for you. Yeah, you need to show the brake change stuff. You need to show oil change stuff. You need to show how to replace a cylinder head. You need to show how to replace an intake manifold gasket. You need to show how to weld stuff. You're going to need to show all of that stuff that everybody and their grandma does, because unfortunately that's just where the largest audience is. And if you really want to have your channel take off, you need the largest audience possible. For me, not a big deal. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in having a quality audience. But I will give you some other tips for your YouTube channel as well. Okay, some other advice that I can give you on a successful YouTube channel is ultimately to, again, approach it as a business. And that, again, is something that I am going to be a horrible advisor on. But that is by choice. I can actually tell you how to do it, and I know how to do it. I just choose not to because I am, again, interested in the quality of my audience more than the quantity of the audience. If you are going to make money, my business model is not the best for that, but I can help you with that. One of the best advice that I got was from a viewer, once again, Dennis Schmidt, which I don't know whatever happened with him. I haven't heard from him in years. Dennis, if you're out there, contact me. I need to buy some new tools from you, by the way. But he went by Sodaman Schmidt, and he used to be on my channel all the time. And I actually met him in person when I was on a business trip out in Arizona. And he had mentioned something about asking like my business model on YouTube. What's the business model? I said, well, I don't really have one because I don't treat it like a business. It's kind of more of a hobby. I'm not really serious about it. And Dennis said, well, whether you realize it or not, it's a business because it makes money. And it got me thinking, and yeah, he's right. It is a business. I just don't treat it like one. But you should. And one of the first things that you do in a business is you need to do market research. And this is actually something that I did, which was how I got my channel off the ground and got started. Like with any business, strike that. Not like with any business. It's actually unlike any business. You are going to have an extremely hard time, more than probably with any other business, in getting it started off the ground. The reason is because when you look at the statistics, with YouTube, I saw a statistic somewhere where there were 240 million videos uploaded every day. 240 million videos every day. Now think about that. How is your video, when you're coming from the ground up, going to stand out against all of those? Now, of course, not all of those are automotive videos. I don't know how many are, but you've got to stand out beyond all of that. I mean, 1 billion videos a week probably, and here's your video out of 1 billion that you need people to watch, and then subscribe. The trick is you have to have the subscribers. And that is where you're really going to get your revenues, from subscribers to your channel. So how do you do that? The first thing that, of course, you do with any business to make sure it's going to get off the ground is you do market research. And that is something that I did. And if not market research, more of examining the market. And one of the things that I kind of have always done for my professional job now, in corporate now, I've kind of, I'm in scientific still, but in a corporate level, is I try to create markets. I try to create the market. You can always find the market. You can always adapt to the market, and your market research will help you do that. I believe in creating a market. And while I can't really help you do that because it depends on your skill set, it depends on what your goals are and things like that, I can at least tell you how I did it. And at the time when I started YouTube, I knew full well that when it came to the type of stuff that I wanted to do in the market, I knew the market would be smaller. You had Scanner Danner, who obviously is kind of probably the most capable technician on YouTube. And that may even be different now because, times have changed over the years and there's so many more people doing this, which makes it harder. Makes it harder to survive when you exist, much less get started. But my thinking was, we've got Scanner Danner, and he's doing exactly the stuff that I want to do, but he's at a level way up here. He's got a $15,000 scan tool. He's got a $5,000 scope. No do-it-yourselfer is going to have that. No do-it-yourselfer is going to have that. And that's okay because that's his market. He's a professional. He's kind of catering more to professionals and especially to students and especially to his students. And that's totally fine. I'm not a professional and I'm also not teaching at a college. So I've got the do-it-yourselfer market is what I'm aiming for. What does the do-it-yourselfer market have? Well, they've got Eric the car guy. And he's going to diagnose it by putting a paper towel roll to something and listening to it. And you can see again and again and again that it doesn't work. And he doesn't do the right thing. So I thought maybe create a market where I can bring the Scanner Danner technology to the do-it-yourselfers by using basic tools that they already probably have. And that was the niche, and that was where you develop the market. And I knew that was going to be successful, quite honestly. It was just a matter of how to get it off the ground. So even when you have something where there is going to be a value for the market, you still are going to struggle immensely getting it off the ground unless you do some things. And I'll be honest, I actually didn't really struggle. I got 1,000 subscribers in my first month. I got 10,000 subscribers. I think it was within probably 7 or 8 months, and continue to grow up past 250,000 now. And I think one of the biggest things that you can do, besides having the content that there is a demand for, the content is the most important, is you've got to keep producing content. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think I've seen people make is that they test the waters. Think about that for a business. Would you just go out and test the waters? No. What business has ever done that? You go full out. When they open a restaurant, they don't just serve appetizers to see if it works. No, they go full out. And you have to do that. So the way you do that is you need to create a lot of content before you launch your channel. Because again, remember, the trick is you've got to get subscribers. If you start a channel and you make a video, and it's an awesome video, what you are going to get is you are going to get probably a lot of views at best, but you're not going to get a lot of subscribers. It's going to be like a cute cat video. It's going to get 10 million views, but look how many subscribers do they have? 300, right? The reason is because there's no indication that there's something to subscribe for. There's nothing indicating that something else is coming up that you want to keep track of. So my recommendation is to make at least 5, 6, maybe 7 videos and put all of them out there so that people can see that this isn't a one-hit wonder thing. This is a continuing thing. This person is producing content. And then when they see that there's all these videos, they're going to want to subscribe so that they can see when the next one comes up. If they see you only have one video, and that was from a month ago, well, why would they subscribe? You don't produce content, right? So you need to give that impression. So now you've identified the market that you want to hit. You've created really good content towards that market. You've created multiple videos for it now so that when people do find you, they're more likely to subscribe, but you still need to get people to find you. And even with all the stuff you're doing right, you're going to find it's not going to work very well. And even getting 1,000 subscribers, which allows you to monetize, and then you make 25 cents a month even then, it's not going to even get to 1,000 subscribers. As a matter of fact, it is something like 99.8% of all channels on YouTube have less than 1,000 subscribers. Your odds of succeeding are infinitesimal. So how are you going to do that? One of the things that can really help is reaching out more. Go on to public forums, go on to like Facebook and things like that where automotive people are. Try to promote your channel. And the more that you do that, again, more people share the videos. One of the things that really worked well for me is my fuel trim videos. Started to get attention from automotive schools that would use this as the curriculum. Obviously, all of those students then became subscribers. And then they tell other people about it. So you kind of need to reach external out of YouTube. Obviously, a really great thing, if you can do it, is to try to get a plug from a successful channel. If you can, and I may help you with that if you want to try to reach out, but I get so many requests for it, I honestly just really don't do it that much. But you may want to try to reach out to another channel and say, hey, can I work something out with you where you can make a plug for my channel? Maybe not like one of the top channels out there, like Scotty Kilmer's not going to do it for you for sure, but maybe another channel that's a little bit bigger than yours, and you can make a thing. Hey, let's trade. I'll make a mention of your channel, you make a mention of mine, and you do that with multiple channels, and that can help build an audience too. But you need to start reaching outside of your little world in order to be successful in that regard. To be honest with you, I didn't do that so much, and if I did, I'm sure I would have reached some bigger audiences. But again, my goal wasn't to reach more subscribers, it was to reach the right subscribers. So again, I'm not doing the advice that I'm giving you, but I will also say that it was probably easier to start a channel, especially like mine 8 years ago. I would say it's harder to do that now because you've got eons more people doing the same things and it dilutes it out more. But you are going to have to work to reach out. Your content alone probably won't do it, and I can tell you for an absolute fact because I see it so often that I know it doesn't do it because I've looked at channels that are phenomenal that never took off. And these are some of the common mistakes I see. They only have 2 videos and they're hoping that that will get the subscribers and then they produce content. No, 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 no. Produce the content. That brings the subscribers. You've got to produce the content even if you aren't getting the subs because they have to have a reason to sub. That's critically important. Okay, final thing, again, keeping with the theme like my friend Dennis mentioned, treating it like a business, like with any business, you have to listen to your customers, right? Every business will send out little questionnaires or little report card things or something. You've got to listen to your customers. You've got to respond to the comments. You've got to basically look and see, am I fulfilling what my audience is looking for? And sometimes you may find you stray off the path. I certainly have a couple times, had to have people reel me back in a little bit. But you need to definitely, like any business, get that feedback and make sure that I am terrible at this. I don't do this, but you probably should. What I'm saying in a simpler way is you cannot produce the content that you want. You have to produce the content your audience wants. And that can actually get a little muddy for some people because you want to do what you're interested in. You want to do what you're passionate about. And you cannot do that. You've got to stay with what your audience really wants, not with what you really want. Obviously, I do not really do a good job of that. I don't particularly care so much. Again, I am not trying to make 10 million subs on my channel. I'm just trying to keep people that are kind of loyal to it and stuff like that. And the reason for that is because of the final advice I'm going to give you. And again, you're probably going to really struggle with this one even more than YouTube, but it's business. It's business, and there is a business model. The thing that I'm not so gung-ho with the YouTube is I hate the business model. I hate it. I hate the business model. It doesn't make sense to me as a person who I believe I have a business mentality. And that is, I don't like that with YouTube, we're not allowed to say how much we make on YouTube and everything like that. But I can tell you that even when you do really well on YouTube, one thing never changes, and that is your profit margin. Your profit margin will always be 50%. And that's just given that YouTube takes half of your revenues, no matter what it is. So if you make 20 bucks a month from your YouTube channel, well, it's because you made 40 and YouTube took 20. If you make $2 million a year off of YouTube, like some few people do, well, it's because you actually made $4 million a year and YouTube took $2 million. Now think about that as a business model. As you grow, you never increase your profit margin. This is a horrible business model. And you make $100,000 a year total, you only get $50,000. You make $200,000 a year total, you only get $100,000. No other successful business has this. You need it to be where you want to fix those expenses, and then your profit margin increases and increases as you increase sales, increase viewers. And that's why I went to the paid channel model, because my paid channel model allows me to do that. I put better content on there. I put content that I know people see the value in. And again, with my more loyal subscribership, I'm more likely to get people to the paid channel. I know I'm kind of giving some secrets away, but I'm trying to help you guys out here. That's the business model, is that, yeah, I have my fees for my website, I have fees for the bandwidth, I have fees for the admin that I have now and everything, but the thing is, those are fixed. Those are the same every year, whether I have 1 subscriber or 1 million subscribers. The more subscribers that I get, then the higher the profit margin. That is a business model that you want to invest in. You don't want to invest in the business model where you are constantly giving half your income no matter how big you get. I think that is horrible. But that is the YouTube business model, and it's not that you can't live on it. I just don't like that business model. But it is the one that you will be facing. You have to, if you are going to live off of YouTube, you have to you have to have a lot of subscribers that view your videos a lot. That is, and it's just really hard to do it because you need twice as many as you really need to live. So it's something to kind of keep in mind with that business model. Would you be successful at making a paid channel? I hope you would, maybe. But I can tell you one of the problems is the more paid channels that are out there, the less likely people are to join new ones because it chips away at them a little bit, you know, so they're paying $10 here, $10 there, $5 here, maybe yours is $3. Well, the trouble is after 5 paid channels, people aren't going to join any more. It's not that they're not going to join any, they're just not going to join new ones. That is a challenge that I think you would definitely face. You might need to be creative and look at some other avenues for maybe drawing income from your videos, maybe going to different platforms, TikTok, whatever. I don't do any other platforms, but maybe you would have success with that. But my suggestion is not to rely just on YouTube if you're hoping to make a financial success out of it. It's going to be very, very difficult to do even when your channel becomes successful. All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and conclude the video because I know this is going on pretty long, but hopefully a lot of really good information there. You guys wanted to talk business. We talked business. I pretty much gave you everything that I know that has worked for me. I've even told you the things that I know, I recognize work against me, but I do anyway. I'm advising you probably don't do that. But again, it depends on your goals. It all depends on your goals. And again, build a business model. Understand your market, understand what your goals are, understand what your passions are, what's going to make you happy. And the biggest thing by far at this point is also to do it, to go for it. One of the biggest mistakes people make with planning any kind of business venture or something is they plan and they plan and they plan and they plan and they look at every possible permutation and everything like that. And what if I did this? And what if but they never get started. They never do it. Get started, do it. But before you do, have the groundwork laid out. But don't have what we call analysis paralysis, where you spend so much time trying to figure out you never actually start it. Get started with it and let me know how it goes for you. And if there's anything I can do to help, put it in the comments and I'll definitely do what I can. But if you want to pursue either the car flipping, the diagnostics and repair, or the YouTube, or a combination of them, I think it is a great way to go. Obviously, you have a passion for one or more of these things if you're a member of this channel. So I say go for it, and I will help you out the best I can. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this really helpful. We'll see you next time.